So why would people open up their relationships? Oftentimes, it's either for practical reasons or for philosophical reasons. And sometimes it's both. But the kind of practical reasons why people would open up their relationships is typically to get more of their needs met. Sometimes it just seems impossible to get all of one's needs met with one romantic partner.
We're going to learn about compersion today. It's a term that's used for people in non-monogamous relationships, but it's also a term that we can apply to any relationship, and you're going to learn all about it in today's conversation. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Weiner. Welcome back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. And to support you, I have written two books. The first is called Becoming a Woman of Value: How to Thrive in Life and Love. And this book is filled with so much wisdom, 30 tips on how to become the best version of yourself, how to show up, stand up, and speak up. And it is available on Amazon. And so is the second book, which is called Choice Points in Dating. I wrote this book to show you how many choices you have in the dating process, from how to think about dating to how to find your partner, how to know what your must-haves and deal breakers are, how to know when to stay, when to go, and how to know you've gone on your last first date. Both of these books are available in paperback and Kindle, and Choice Points also is available as an audiobook. This week's tip on becoming a woman of value from the Woman of Value book is the first tip in the book, and it's called Love Yourself First. What does it mean to love yourself? It means to practice self-care, not just by getting massages and manicures and pedicures. It's really about really believing in yourself, knowing your self-worth. And this requires you to do some honest introspection, working with a therapist or a coach like me to help you know what your worth is, especially if you have been brought up by a family that didn't honor and respect who you are. So my challenge to you this week is to take one step towards self-love, whatever it looks like to you. Before I bring on my guest today, I want to invite you to join Your Last First Date. It is my Facebook group, and it's for women over 40 who are looking for a positive place to support them on their journey to lasting love. It is a rare, rare group in the group world, because we honestly provide you with good information, with positive support, and most groups are not supervised the way mine is, and they don't have clear boundaries and guidelines the way mine does. So join us at Your Last First Date. Join us at Your Last First Date. My guest today is Dr. Marie Thouin. She is a leading expert and scholar on compersion and consensual non-monogamy. She authored the first ever scholarly book on compersion, as well as two pioneering research studies, and the first ever encyclopedia entry on compersion. Her work has been featured in several academic conferences, workshops, magazines, and podcasts. Welcome to the podcast, Marie.
Thank you so much, Sandy. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. This is a really interesting topic, and I know a lot of people listening are like, what is compersion and why do I need to know about it? So let's start there. What is it?
Put very simply, compersion is our wholehearted participation in the joy and the happiness of other people. And that can go for any context. However, the word compersion was coined and developed and popularized in the context of consensual non-monogamy. So those types of relationships where people can and sometimes do have many intimate, sexual and or romantic relationships at the same time. So in that context, compersion usually will refer to the happiness one feels when their partner is experiencing joy or happiness with another intimate partner. And it's not just an emotion, it can also be attitudes, behaviors, and thoughts, like people experiencing positive thoughts or attitudes in relation to their partner's other relationships, and thus wholeheartedly participating in their joy rather than interpreting these other relationships as a threat or as a negative event.
Experiencing as a positive event rather than a negative event, which most people who are monogamous say, how the heck do you do that? Right.
Right.
So yeah, explain a little bit about why somebody would open up a relationship and the benefits and how they can get to that place of happiness instead of jealousy, which is the common way to think about these things.
Mm-hmm. So, why would people open up their relationships? Oftentimes, it's either for practical reasons or for philosophical reasons. And sometimes it's both. But the kind of practical reasons why people would open up their relationships is typically to get more of their needs met. Sometimes it just seems impossible to get all of one's needs met with one romantic partner. I can give you a couple of examples. One would be at the sexual level, where some people really like to have a sex life that is multifaceted with maybe one partner they have vanilla sex with, and oftentimes that might be a live-in partner, a spouse, somebody that they have an otherwise very egalitarian relationship with. And maybe they like to have a kinky sexual relationship with someone else who intrinsically they feel like cannot be their nesting partner with whom they have an egalitarian relationship with because there's power dynamics involved. So that's one kind of a classic example for which people would open up their relationship. For some people, it feels more at the level of activities. For example, in my study that I did for my book, I had participants who said like, well, I really don't like to go dancing, but my spouse really likes to go dancing. And I'm so happy that my spouse's boyfriend loves to take her out dancing and I don't have to feel guilty that I'm not providing that pleasure for her. So more people are getting more of everyone's needs met. The other reason why people would open their relationship is philosophical. Some people just really don't believe in the idea of you just need to love me and make love to me for the rest of your life in order to prove your love to me. And maybe they don't believe in that for themselves as well. Maybe they feel that in order to reach their full erotic and human potential, they want to have the freedom to have many different intimate connections. And that is more aligned with their philosophy around freedom and autonomy. So these are two general categories of why people would open up.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess the other thing that I'm thinking of is what made you interested in this topic?
Yeah, so I always felt uncomfortable with the concept of mononormativity. And mononormativity is the assumption, the very widespread assumption that monogamy is the only valid way to love. And that if I love one person, the only way to prove my love to them is to never romantically love anyone else or to never sexually be into somebody else or act upon it. And that just never made sense to me as far as how I would perceive my intimate connections. And I wanted to know who are the people who are living in those non-traditional and non-monogamous relationships, and how can these be successful? And when I first encountered the word compersion at a conference in 2014, pardon me, in 2014, it's just like a light bulb went on. And I felt that this was a philosophy of love that I could truly subscribe to. And so I went and did a PhD, which was on the topic of compersion, and I went and investigated what does it take for people to experience compersion, for people to experience their partner's other relationships as a positive event rather than a really destructive, very devastating event, which is what the culture would tell us it is.
Yeah, interesting. And I think that the culture definitely tells us it's a hard event. People can't even handle when people have friendships outside of a relationship. I mean, so much is based on our own personal fears and our insecurities. And I remember a friend of mine getting involved with a guy who had been in open relationships, and he talked about how important communication was. Like I think you definitely have to communicate well if you're going to be in a relationship like this.
Mhm.
But you said, you were curious about what's involved and how people make it work. So if somebody wants to discuss compersion and consensual non-monogamy with their current partner, what are some of the things they should start with?
Well, they should start with really understanding what are their needs and their desires in their relationship, and where are they coming from in terms of wanting to open the relationship. Because sometimes, like when people come from a space of deficit and even resentment towards their current partner for not fulfilling all of their needs, it can be really tricky to go and add new partners when there's unspoken or unresolved anger and blame. So I would definitely encourage people to make sure that they are clear about not blaming their partners for what they're not getting, and coming from a fuller cup and coming from gratitude for their current relationship. And then really discussing how do they take little steps into non-monogamy at first. I can tell you, as a relationship coach, I get a lot of people in my office in a state of distress because they took big steps. They decided to open their relationship one day, and then they were, you know, spending the weekend with their new lover the next weekend. And that is really intense. Our nervous systems and our minds have to adapt to a new paradigm of open relationship, and we have to adapt to it progressively. So I would start with having a lot of conversations about, okay, like, what do you want more of? What do I want more of? And what are some small steps that we could take to get used to the idea that if I'm going to be interested in someone else, erotically or romantically, what does it mean for us? How do we create new ways to feel like our relationship is special and unique and valuable, even if this is no longer exclusive, even if the sex or the romance is no longer exclusive to our relationship? I would add to that also discussing what kind of non-monogamy do you want to explore? Because there's different forms. There is polyamory, where people have concurrent emotional committed relationships with many people. There's swinging, where people just go to events once in a while and then they might swap with each other's partner that is more sexual in nature rather than romantic in nature. There's just open relationships where people might have sex with other people here and there, but they're not necessarily committed emotionally, pardon me, to other people. So there's different forms of non-monogamy under the grand umbrella of consensual non-monogamy.
So when you talk about small steps, what would be an example of a small step?
One small step would be to discuss crushes, like to talk with your partner about who do you find attractive and why. And to just even get used to talking about it can be really wonderful. Because nothing has happened yet. It's not like the threat is here, but you're getting used to knowing each other at that deeper level and taking that taboo conversation out of the shadows. Another small step could be to go on a date with someone else, either separately or as a couple. Some people really like to start dating someone else as a couple. And yes, there are people out there who would love to go on a date with a couple, so that you feel like you're connected in that experience. But I would recommend for the first dates to have a boundary of maybe not having sex on the first date, like to just keep it to a conversation and see how that feels.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/lastfirstdate to learn more and claim this offer. Take it slow and talk a lot. You know, you're bringing up the questions to ask, but also crushes. Because you know what, in every relationship, people do have attractions to other people. And I think a lot of people are in denial of that, which I think is harmful because it's natural and human to find other people attractive outside of your relationship. You know, and I think just to acknowledge that, even if you don't open your relationship, is an important thing, you know, and sometimes those attractions can bring a lot more eroticism to the partner that you have currently, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even a little bit of role playing can be
Mm,
very erotic and can help people get in the mindset of, oh, okay, like we don't necessarily have to just center on you and me, like it can help expand the mind or the erotic mind to the
yeah.
possibility of being attracted to other people.
hmm So let's bring this conversation to monogamy because you say, I think, that compersion can exist in monogamous relationships. And I think that's what we kind of started talking about a little bit here. Tell us some ways that people can bring this to a monogamous relationship.
Sure. I think people often experience envy and jealousy in the realm of monogamous relationship, and that can be in the form of my partner has other hobbies that they spend a lot of time on, and I feel like they should be spending more time with me. Or maybe they have a friendship that feels really close and significant, and it hurts a little bit to know that they're not getting all of their emotional needs met with me, even if that friendship is completely platonic. So experiencing compersion in in those contexts can look like really asking your partner, what do they get out of those other activities or relationships, and why is it significant to them? And can you get behind that? Can you also talk about how you can get more of your needs met? Because when jealousy and envy arise, oftentimes there is intelligence behind those emotions that might be telling you, like, oh, I want to feel more significant, or I want to feel more involved in some hobbies. Maybe I'm envious that my partner is experiencing joy somewhere else, but maybe it's a sign that I want to experience more joy in my life as well. Like just to investigate what is the information that these emotions are conveying. And if I do really want more intimacy and more connectedness and more of a sense of significance with my partner, how can I create that without attempting to control what they're doing or put down their joy in other areas? Are there ways to get my needs met without making their world smaller or my world smaller?
Yeah, well, we don't have these skills naturally. That's for sure. I mean, so many of us just were raised to not get enough of what we needed. And so we think we are supposed to get everything from one partner, which is, I think, has destroyed so many relationships.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think as we get older, because my audience is mostly over 40 and even beyond 50, 60 and beyond, that we have full lives and we know how to create our own joy, hopefully, and our own
Mhm.
pleasure. And relationships can be the icing on the cake, but they're not everything and they don't complete us. And there's not all those fake horrible messages that we got as children and as young adults that relationships have to look and feel a certain way and that we won't be whole until we have one person and only that one person right,
Mhm.
in our lives. And there is not just one person for us. I mean, some people find one person and they stay with them their whole lives. I never really understood that, honestly. I mean, I have friends who met their current spouse in high school, never slept with anyone else. Like I'd be sitting there going, what does it feel like to sleep with someone else? And I've been with this person for like 50 years. Like, what is out there? What else is possible? And not everybody
Right.
has that curiosity and has that level of need, but it certainly would be a real question for me. So the problem is that a lot of people do have jealousy, and they don't know how to meet their own needs. But the other issue is that a lot of people find non-monogamy to be very stigmatized and
Mhm.
scary, and there's a lot of judgment. I know in the dating world now, you find on dating apps, people will write that they are practicing ethical non-monogamy. There's so many terms that I had to look up because I didn't know what they were. There's solo, there's ENM, there's a solo ENM or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
tell us a
solo
couple
poly.
of those. And then let's talk about the destigmatization because I think that's important too.
Oh, absolutely. So, a couple of different forms of non-monogamy. Yes, solo polyamory is very popular and actually increasingly popular in women over 50s who over 50 who might be divorced or widowed and decide that they don't want a full-time husband at home. So imagine anyone really in any age range, like wanting to have their independence, have their own home, not interested in sharing their finances or sharing their everyday breakfast and lunch with someone, but wants a love story or more than one love story. That person could be solo polyamorous, meaning that their primary relationship is with themselves and everyone else is second in a way. So that is solo poly. There's also polyamory, which is when someone has several concurrent committed relationships, and is okay with their partner having also concurrent emotional committed relationships with others. And sometimes people live under the same roof, sometimes they don't. Under that umbrella, there is kitchen table poly, which means that everyone knows each other in the polycule or the polyamorous ecosystem of partners and lovers. They could have a dinner around the kitchen table and they would all be comfortable with each other. There's also parallel polyamory, which means that partners date separately and those people don't really intersect or they don't really hang out or know each other. It's just parallel. And then in the middle, there's garden party poly, which would be in between kitchen table and parallel polyamory. Maybe they meet a few times a year. They don't really know each other that well, but they know of each other and they're comfortable with that.
Mm,
So that's just a few different flavors of non-monogamy for you.
that's
And
just, yeah.
what was the other part of your question again?
Yeah. So the other part was the destigmatization.
Ah, yes. We've gone such a long way in terms of destigmatizing LGBTQ identities. I think as a society, I mean, of course, depending on where you live, um, now we accept that not everyone is heterosexual, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean that their love is less if they're not in a opposite sex relationship. In the same way, I think we are now faced with the reality that love and relationships are not a one size fits all, and that the nuclear family, monogamous couple as the center of people's life doesn't necessarily work for everyone. It's not optimal for everyone. And why are we still stigmatizing relationships that fall outside of that norm? Relationships that are either not monogamous or even people who are single by choice, who decide to not subscribe to the idea of the couple as the thing that should be in the center of their lives, or even people who are living apart together. not living under the same roof, but, very happily in a committed relationship. I think that the more we accept these different kinds of relationships, the more we're also moving towards acceptance of non-monogamy, which is also a form of relationship diversity.
Yeah, I just had a living apart together guest on my show. So she talked about the stigma also because people have ideas about what's right, what's wrong. I'm watching a show on HBO called Forbidden Love.
Mhm.
And that's about relationships where people are very far apart in terms of religious beliefs. And
Mm.
there's an Amish guy who's dating what they call an English person. I mean, we have all these mixed relationships, and how do you make them work? And what's interesting as a spectator watching is the ones where there's a lot of control, where you have to be like me in order for this relationship to work. I can't see
Mhm.
these ever succeeding. It's
Mhm.
like, of course, you need to obey me because, that's what Muslims do. And where I come from, my father has 5 wives, and you're just one of them. And you have to wear this outfit, and you have to do this, and you can't leave the house like that. And you're dealing with somebody who's used to a certain way of life, and you're telling them they have to change who they are. That's very different from saying you have a right to be who you are, which is what you're talking about. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think that when we challenge our beliefs, I think that look at how you're judging, look at how you think of relationships in a certain way, and how many relationships are really successful that have stayed together for a long time. A lot of them are not happy, you know,
Mhm.
they don't really change up their relationship much. It's kind of stale, and often parallel lives. Where I remember when I got divorced, somebody came up to me and said, I've been unhappy for a long time, but I made it work. And I'm like, good for you. What does that have to do with me?
Should I congratulate you?
Yeah, right. I mean, seriously, like, why are you giving me advice? And I didn't ask for
Mm.
it, number one. Number two, you're miserable, and I'm making a different choice. And we all
Yes.
have the right to choose.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually was writing a blog on that earlier today. The idea that
Oh,
longevity is seen as this measure of success for relationships in our society. And I think it is a poor measure of success because there are so many relationships that don't last forever until death do us part, but they can be very successful. People can learn so much and they can have children, they can have really, really meaningful and wonderful relationships, even when they don't last forever, which, under that philosophy is like, oh, that's the only measure of success is if it ends by the death of one of the people in it. And I
yeah,
think there should be better measures of success.
I agree. I have really tried to redefine success in
Yeah.
dating and relationships as I evolved as a dating coach, and also as a woman dating after my divorce. I fell into some of the same patterns that I had before my marriage. And then I redefined relationships along the way for myself. And I am very happy not being in a relationship when I'm with the wrong person. Like, I would much
Right.
rather be alone than be with somebody who's not right for me.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will judge dating coaches if they're not married, then they don't know how to guide me. And that's not true. So,
Mhm.
I think that if you understand what makes a healthy relationship for you, if you can help guide people as to what will work best for you and help them make those choices, to me, that's success. And then how do you make a relationship work? How do you communicate well? How do you set boundaries and keep boundaries and be kind and know how to do conflict better? Like, that's success. This is a rare thing to find people who can really do all those things.
I agree. And, I don't think that there's more success to be had in non-monogamy versus monogamy or vice versa. I'm not here to champion non-monogamy per se. I'm here to champion relationship diversity and to champion the idea that in intimate relationships, we can make our worlds bigger and we can make each other's lives bigger and better. And to me, that's success. If you're in a partnership where you feel like more of you gets to be experienced and enjoyed versus, having to put yourself in a little box and experience less of you, to me, that is everything.
I agree. So many of us are so used to being in the box that it's hard to believe there's another option. And I think it's important to put that out there because we do have choices. We have many choices.
Yeah.
Um, so, Marie, I always ask this question at the end, and it's kind of an interesting question today because we're talking about non-monogamy and compersion. But the name of the show is Last First Date Radio, and so I'm all about the last first date. But sometimes it's not your last first date.
Mhm.
It's more about like really not just keep dating, dating, dating to figure out what it is that you want and need. So what are your final words of advice for anyone who wants to go on their last first date or have compersion or whatever it is that you want to answer here?
Ah, yes, it's such an interesting point because in a non-monogamous paradigm, the idea of a last first date would not necessarily be a goal,
Exactly.
but I would rephrase that in terms of maybe what advice I would give to someone who wants to go on the best first dates ever.
Okay.
How do you go on, the best dates of your life? And actually, I was talking to a friend who has been dating quite a bit, especially in her 50s, and she was like, I've never gone on a bad date because I always go with the intention of having a good time. And to me, that actually encapsulates it. It's like go with the intention of having a great time and experience more of who you are versus trying to manage yourself to be appealing and to manage your expression in terms of, oh, what are they going to like or not like? How do you show up with your full self and have a great time? That would be
Yeah.
my advice.
Good advice. Yeah, don't just try to manage all the things that you think somebody wants. And man, I just came from LA and it's like such a appearance-based town and there's
Mm.
so much focus on not being yourself in so many ways. And I found myself like my energy was getting depleted in a certain way. Like I had to really work hard at tuning into me and what would make me happy, which included a 6 mile walk in the morning around the reservoir. And it's beautiful and not doing touristy things and staying away
Right.
from the Hollywood area. But yeah, don't just try to be something you're not. Like really have a great time, experience more of who you are, and tuning into your reality. Like speak up and tell people, what's going on for you, and you know, share your emotions. All those things that people really struggle with.
Mhm.
I love that. So, Marie, tell us what is the best way to find you? And also, I know you have some free stuff and discounted stuff for my audience.
Absolutely. So I'm also a dating and relationship coach, and people can learn more about my work at mariethouin.com. And there you can learn about both my research and my book on compersion, which is called What is Compersion? And people can learn also about my work on mindful dating, which truly applies whether people are monogamous or non-monogamous or somewhere in between or questioning. And for your listeners, I would like to offer a 50% off my recorded masterclass, which is called Six Pillars of Mindful Dating. And that is a 90-minute class where I just describe my framework of mindful dating. How do you go from self-exploration to an empowered self-concept and mindful swiping? How do you use the apps mindfully? And I'm also teaching a class on mindful swiping in September, so people can check out that class on my website, but get a discount on the mindful dating masterclass. I also offer a free 30-minute exploratory session to people who are interested in one-on-one coaching, because we all know how difficult and challenging it can be to navigate dating and relationships, and sometimes we just need that personalized one-on-one support. So I would love to be of support to folks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, for teaching us what compersion is, and just giving us some alternative ways to look at relationships, because it's not one size fits all. And I think the more you can explore what works for you, the better we are, the better our relationships are.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share.
My pleasure. And thanks everybody for listening. If you love our show, if you could do us a small favor and give us a high rating and review on Apple Podcasts, that would be fantastic. You can follow the show, you can share it with friends. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.